heat waves, drought, tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, blizzards, bitter cold. Extreme weather has an incredible impact on people across the globe. On Mount Washington, our scientists brave some of the worst weather on the planet to improve our understanding of our warming world.
My name is Brian Fitzgerald, and joining us this evening to tell us all about the work of Climate Central is Bernadette Woods Plackey, who is Climate Central's VP for Engagement and Chief Meteorologist. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's program. If you're not already familiar with Mount Washington Observatory, we are a nonprofit, member-supported organization with a mission of advancing the understanding of the forces that create Earth's weather and climate. And the way that we accomplish that is by operating our mountain top weather station with around-the-clock weather observation and forecasting, by conducting research and product testing, and by developing and offering innovative educational programs. If you have questions for tonight's speaker and you're joining us through Zoom, make sure to use the Q&A button. You can find that at the bottom of your toolbar there on your Zoom screen. We'll be collecting questions throughout the program. We'll make sure to leave time at the end, so make sure you get those questions in. If you're watching us either on recording through Facebook or YouTube on those channels, welcome. Thanks for the viewing. If you're not able to submit questions this time, we'd certainly love to follow up with you at a later date. Please feel free to connect with us for another live program next time through Zoom. You can register over at mountwashington.org. All right, well, before we hand things off to Bernadette this evening, I am going to launch a quick poll that we put together. So let's see if we can get everyone engaged in that if you are joining us on Zoom. So I am going to actually launch our poll, if I can get that working here. Wouldn't that be nice? No, that's not. Oh, I guess I already accidentally put it together without being able to share it tonight. Sorry about that, folks. We had some really good questions there, which is really a shame. Well, like usual, we always are curious where folks are joining from. Well, oh well, won't be able to do it tonight. Sorry about that, Bernadette, after all that good work. We were really curious where folks were joining from. We were curious what your favorite type of weather is. And then
It's
the last
working.
question we came
I
up
see
with,
it. I see it
you do,
working.
you do see it working? Yeah, are you
It,
actually
it's
able to?
on it's on my screen.
Oh, all right. Well, we got the one question there going. All right. Thanks, folks. Everyone was able to participate despite not getting the other questions in there. Well, we'd love to know where you're joining from nonetheless. And then the last question, which now we'll have to find out what the answer is later, we'll leave you in suspense, is let's see if I can remember it off the top of my head. What percentage of adults in the United States believe that global warming is occurring? And I believe we had everything from, well, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, maybe even 90%. I don't know. Start thinking about that in your mind because Bernadette is going to be talking about that in just a little bit. All right. Well, so let's go ahead. Let's end the poll here. We'll share some results. We have great representation, like usual, from the Granite State here. About a third of you joining from New Hampshire. Representation from all across New England. And then a quarter of you joining from outside of New England, and even someone joining from outside the US of A. Well, welcome everyone, no matter where you're joining from. And with that, I will stop sharing some of the results here and would love to hand it over to Bernadette. Bernadette, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. And thanks everybody for joining us. This is this is one of those events when I saw pop up, they said absolutely, because who doesn't love Mount Washington, right? So this is just an honor to be able to talk to a crowd that equally loves Mount Washington. So tonight we're going to talk about what Climate Central does. We're a nonprofit research and communication group. We'll get a little bit into that. And what we do is really focus on science for storytelling purposes. So my quick story before getting into it is I went to Penn State for meteorology, and there's a lot of Penn State connections at the observatory, and I always loved that. Some friends who got to intern over the years. Then I got into operational forecasting with most of it in television for the first half of my career. lived in Arkansas, lived in Lexington, Kentucky, and then spent a lot of time in Baltimore. And then I shifted over to Climate Central about 13 years ago now, where I've done a whole range of different things, and you'll see some of it coming up. Now, I had to bring some of these up though too. My Mount Washington experience, middle of the summer in August, and you see winds 70 miles per hour. They actually hit legit hurricane strength while I was there. So it clocked at 74. I did get to experience it. You see on the bottom left, that's one of my sons who is climbing up toward the observatory there in the tower. And then on the right, you see that's my husband, who's also a Penn Stater. And then our twin sons. So you can tell they're really happy to be there. So it was a great time. All right. So Climate Central, as I said, we're a nonprofit, really focusing on helping people understand climate science and making it local and making it personal. And we do this through various different projects and programs. Overall, we're taking climate science and advancing it, translating it in ways that people can understand what's going on and understand how this is affecting them, the people, the places, the things that they love, and what can be done about it. And then, for the most part, working through trusted messengers to help the public understand and connect to things that already are already a part of our lives in different ways. And I'll show you a few examples on that. So where I'm going to start all of this is with Climate Matters. Now, this is a program I came over to direct 13 years ago, as I said. And initially, it started with one TV meteorologist on a National Science Foundation grant. And you see him down there on the bottom right. That's Jim Gandy from Columbia, South Carolina. And what we did is we were able to bring in weather segments connected to climate change in his community and then present them in timely ways. So in the summer, it was around heat. In the planting season, it was around shifting planting zones, things like that, right? So over time, over a course of a year, we did some testing pre and post and showed that as he brought climate related segments into his weathercasts in ways that connected with his audience, people were really interested. They learned and it opened their minds on climate science and solutions. So over time, this program has really expanded, not just TV meteorologists, but also journalists. And we're working with content creators and influencers now and a whole range of climate communicators. And I'll have the code, the QR code at the end that any of you and all of you can be a climate communicator. And we have these resources free and available at our website for you to, one, continue learning, and two, to bring in any form of communication that you do, whether it's on social media, whether you do presentations in your work or whatever that might be. So why TV meteorologists, right? Well, they are uniquely positioned in a way that they're trusted messengers in their community. Even when a forecast may not go the way people like, they keep coming back. And they're the only scientists that many people really genuinely see. Now, even as our media landscape is changing dramatically over these past 13 years of doing this, we still see that TV meteorologists have been the first to make some of the transition to social media, digital media, and different forms in their community. So they're still leading voices on this, even if it's beyond the television. They are skilled communicators, and extreme weather is how most people experience climate change. So we have broken down this program in 3 different ways. Education, we do a lot of workshops, webinars, we go to key conferences. We secondly produce a ton of content and data analysis and research that's packaged into these forms of communication that, again, all of you are welcome to use. And you'll see a whole host of examples. And that comes out weekly. So there's a lot of stuff in there. And then network support. Often people in our community are looking for a specific expert in, say, drought, in Spanish speaking language, in Texas. So we work with the science in the expert community to help make these connections with the media too. So when we approach all of this, focusing on the science first and foremost, that is core of everything that we do at Climate Central. We are non-advocacy, we are non-political. We are really about science for communication purposes. So we localize data when we can. And in this program specifically, we do local analysis for over 240 cities in the US. So I'll show you some of those examples. Make it simple and clear. Again, you've got this complex topic of climate science, but we can break it down in some messages that people can understand and resonate with. And then we operate on a news cycle. We're going to put out a heat analysis in the Northern Hemisphere summer. We're going to put out snow analysis on times like this. So that's the way we approach our editorial calendar. And then we do this multiple formats, English and Spanish weekly. Over time, I love showing this one now because this community has become some of the leading voices on climate change in a trusted way. And this is Shel Winkley. This is when he worked on air in Bryan College Station, Texas. The thing is, Shel now works with us. He's my colleague. So he's joined the team here because he's done so well with this and has been so interested in the subject matter that he has made that change. And it's a real big community we've been able to grow. And here's just a couple of snapshots from on the top left. That's one of our broadcast conferences, the people getting together. On the bottom left is one of our international weather presenter groups. It's people from a whole host of different countries around the world. We have an annual meeting where we gather and learn more and connect and understand how the science is changing, the best ways to communicate, being on that cutting edge of this changing media landscape. And then on the top right, you see the stripes, a whole fun Show Your Stripes campaign. For those who don't know the warming stripes, and that was what was on the invitation for this, is each line is a global temperature and compared to normal. So when you see the blue lines, that's colder than normal. When you see the red lines, it's warmer than normal. And on almost every single design, it does some version of a transition from blue to red. And we localize those and we even put it on gear. I've got scarves. You see some scarves there, mugs there. And then that year, that was 2023, it was June 22nd, but usually it's June 21st. It's whatever the summer solstice is. And that's the beginning of the season of the biggest extremes that we see in the Northern Hemisphere. So that's a day we use to collectively come together as a community, all of us, you included. We want to see your stripes in June. And it's an opportunity to start climate conversations and help people understand. So what we've learned over the years through this program is going to show up in the rest of this presentation. First and foremost, the golden rule of all communication is know your audience. And that's why we put together some of those poll questions at the beginning, not just where you're from, but other things too. And that can mean topic, that can mean tone, that can mean timing. There's a lot of different ways to get to know your audience, but you want to connect to them. Meet people where they are. Too often, especially right now, we focus on what divides us. But there is so much more that unites us. Just look at the Olympics that we wrapped up, right? So we want to connect on those shared issues. Personalize, localize. Take this big global issue and break it down to a local level. Simplify, drop the jargon. This is where meteorologists really are good because when we come up with forecasts, it's a lot of equations that are factoring into that, and we can break it down into a simple message. Trying to do that same thing with climate change here. And for everyone out there, you don't have to be perfect. It's starting and learning. And over time, you continue to refine that communication and you learn more and you do more with it. When or how you can tell a story. Stories are ways that we can take people on journeys and open up minds, but not everyone's in a full storytelling opportunity. This is something with a lot of the messengers we work with, journalists, media, and otherwise, they are in a prime position to do that. And last and least, not least, I always try to push this one too. Don't be afraid and don't overthink it. You will see you have public opinion on your side and you also have science on your side. So just know that when you go into a conversation. All right, so that golden rule, that's where we're starting. This is research. Some of you may already know this, but for those who don't, it's really important to ground this entire conversation here. Yale and George Mason University have done foundational research going back to 2008, twice a year, on understanding where the American public is on the concept of climate change. And also, they intertwine words here. They use global warming since they started this. I'm going to go back and forth. I know scientifically there's some differences, but I may say climate change. You'll see in this research, it says global warming. The point is, look at these bubbles, right? There are 6 categories of how Americans view climate change. On the left, alarmed and concerned. These are the people that really understand a lot, really want to move forward action. Sometimes they don't always know what action is best to take or that they could take, but that is well over half the population. In the middle here, cautious, disengaged, and doubtful. These are people where it's just not a priority. They're not necessarily against it. And even the doubtful, they're willing to listen to something. It's just they've got other things going on in their life that are more important to them. On the right, this is the dismissive. It is 11% of the population. Since this research has been done, it's really only bumped up and down maybe 1 to 2%. It has been fairly locked in close to that 10, 11% since the beginning. The thing is, though, this is the group that has gotten a way outsized voice and has driven this partisanship on climate change, unfortunately, because it is a science, it is affecting us. There's a lot of things we can do about it. And that 11% is what has gotten a really outsized voice. So when you know this, you can engage in conversations and communication very differently, knowing that more people are interested in talking about it than you think. And to me, that's the biggest piece of misinformation going on right now with climate change is we underestimate people's interest in this subject and climate actions to solve it. Now let's break that down even more. They've taken all of this and packaged it into these maps. You can go into the Yale Climate Opinion Maps if you want to Google, and you can explore down county, state level. You can go congressional districts. There's a whole lot of ways you can cut this. And then across the top, select a question. There are 20 some questions. I'm going to highlight a few of them. This was the question we were trying to do in the poll in the beginning. Estimated percent of adults who think that global warming is happening. The national average is 72%. And you notice on this map, there are very few areas where it drops below that yellow into the blue. And this is a county map. So that's where people are. And even geographically, that's where people are. When we start to see these numbers drop is caused mostly by human activity. You start to see a lot more blue. Also, this is interesting that most scientists, that percent of adults who believe that most scientists think it's happening. So more people think climate change is happening than they think scientists think it's happening. So that's interesting, and it's not accidental. Estimated percent of adults who somewhat or strongly support funding into renewable energy resources. This is when you start to see the numbers jump way up. People love climate actions, especially renewable energy. There's a whole host of questions here you can explore. Also, look at this one. Regulations on carbon dioxide. Regulations. Look at that, 74%. And this one really stands out to me. This is one of the reasons our organization exists, from my opinion. Percent of adults who somewhat strongly agree that schools should teach about the causes, consequences, and potential solutions. 77%. Even in this moment when we're seeing a lot show up at the school level and banning of books, we're seeing this. People have questions. They know something's happening and they don't always know what that means for them or what they can do about it. And that's what you see in this map. But then look at this one. If it's really one of our biggest challenges and people want to learn, but we don't even discuss it occasionally, even with family and friends, how are we going to move forward on this issue? So that is why we are all here tonight. And I'm going to get into some examples from Climate Central, how we've taken climate science and packaged it into different communication. And I'll take you through a few different examples of ways we've done that. So we personalize, we localize, and we try to break down the science into more easily accessible visuals, topics, and data. From this one, basic climate science. This is why we know climate change is happening. I mean, we see it show up in a whole host of ways, from rising temperatures and changing weather patterns, but we know because of the greenhouse effect, right? This is science going back to the 1800s that nobody challenges. And we can measure what's in that atmosphere, and we know what is going into the atmosphere. This is how it shows up. This is a way of looking at our global temperatures and just how high they're rising, trying to add some color pop there. And again, we usually do Fahrenheit in the United States, but when it comes to the Paris Climate Change Agreement, that target is 1.5 degrees Celsius globally. So whenever we do some of our global temperature comparisons here, you'll see the Celsius pop up. But again, we try to stick more with Fahrenheit for the United States. This one is always interesting to me. People say, so what is a degree or two, right? Why should I even care? Well, look what happens. A shift just in a small average puts us in a whole new climate zone. And you see on this, on the right, there's a whole lot more red. That means a lot more extreme heat. On the left, though, guess what? It's still cold. It's still going to be cold. It's just not as frequently, usually not as intense, and not as long lasting. And this is how it shows up in New Hampshire. Now, I know we have people joining us from a lot of places, so there are some national things in here too, but I tried to hone in on a few New Hampshire specifics. So more warm winter days in Concord. The season that is warming the fastest is winter for New Hampshire and actually most of the United States, and by a lot. Burlington, this record set on the bottom right here, this is record lows to record highs. So it's another way you can look at how things are out of balance, right? We used to, when you'd get record colds, you'd get record warms, and over time, you may get in a pattern where you have more of one versus the other, but over time they tended to balance out. But that's just not the case anymore. Look at from 1970s, 80s, how it just goes up. And one of the reasons all this record cold this summer in the East, excuse me, this winter in the East is so noteworthy is because it just doesn't happen that much anymore. And even in our records tracker, which there's a link to on our website, we have seen even more record heat numbers hit in this same time frame for 2026 than record cold, because the rest of the country has been so darn warm, but you just don't hear about it as much because it's so rare to get this kind of cold anymore. Less extreme cold. Here's another way of looking at it. No one's saying it's not cold. So I just want to go on record as having said that. Minus 25, minus 30 is cold, but that used to happen more frequently. And it just doesn't happen as much as it used to. One of the ways that matters, the Winter Olympics. You know, this is a timely one, an analysis we put together with some researchers from Canada who had been looking at this. When you get less cold, less nights below freezing, less days below freezing, you just can't maintain the frozen world the same way. And when we look at Olympic host cities going forward, the viability is getting less and less. And the International Olympic Committee even held off on issuing the last couple of Winter Olympic cities because of this reason. They wanted to be in a place where they can ensure that the sports can continue. And there's a group, Protect Our Winters, who does a whole lot of work in this space and really has athletes stepping up and trying to help people understand they need the frozen world to do their winter sports. So in the summer, and I know it's not summer right now, and it might be hard to even think about that for some people, but this is another way how this can shift over time. And looking at this graphic, for example, this is another way we've put together an analysis. Sort of, again, what's a couple of degrees, right? Well, when you look at your average summer high temperature and you take it out by the end of the century, I know that's still some time away. However, a couple of degrees puts you in an entirely new climate zone. So New Hampshire is going to feel more like North Carolina. Then another hallmark we see with climate change is a warmer atmosphere holds more moisture. So we do explainer graphics around things like this to help people understand that. And when we have an atmosphere with more water in it, when there's a trigger for that rain to come down, it's coming down in bigger buckets. And this is a graphic from the National Climate Assessment. On the bottom left in the Southwest, you can see that a lot of this area is getting drier, but when they're getting their heaviest rain events, it's still coming down in bigger buckets. So really the distribution of how they're experiencing rain is nothing, 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 then downpours that are overwhelming the system. In the Northeast is where we're seeing our biggest extremes. And a couple of examples for New Hampshire specifically was we took that analysis and went even deeper to 1 hour rainfalls. Because when you look at overall numbers, that's noteworthy. But what tends to force us to change how we build, how our infrastructure is put together, where we build too, comes down to some of these extremes. And when we see these 1 hour rainfall events really on the rise, that's when we overwhelm the system. And I know there have been some really big flooding events the past couple of years in Vermont and New Hampshire. And this is where we're seeing these rainfall events really spike. But on the opposite side, if we don't have that trigger, that extra warmth in the atmosphere forces evaporation even quicker. So it's forcing droughts to intensify more rapidly. And we're even getting these flash droughts at times. Now, that plays out in big ways out west, but it does affect the whole country. And it sets the stage for the opportunity for what we call fire weather days, when it's dry, when there's no rain coming out of the sky, when the ground has been really sort of, the extra moisture has been pulled out, and when we have wind and low relative humidities. So it's the dry, the wind, the low relative humidity packaged together for these fire weather days. And out west, huge spikes. But even across the east, we're seeing some of that. And even outside of those fires, though, it doesn't have to happen in our community because we're seeing that smoke come our way across the entire country. And this is a huge health hazard. We're seeing these on the rise. And many of us saw very visibly over the past couple of summers with all the wildfires that have been happening in the western part of Canada. So that's just the atmosphere. But the vast majority of heat actually goes into the ocean. I'm talking over 90%. And that changes our ecosystems in a whole lot of different ways. And it supercharges our coastal storms. So when we have storms that make their way over the ocean, whether it's tropical or even some of these nor'easters, we're seeing them bomb out more quickly. And I use a general term, I had to think about it because it's bombogenesis in the north, but it's rapid intensification when we talk about these hurricanes and tropical systems. And so warmer oceans really supply that extra moisture for these storms. And then when a storm does make its way on land, even with our nor'easters, we're seeing them come with higher pushes of water because of sea level rise. So it's going farther inland. And then the amount of moisture coming out of these storms comes down again in those heavier amounts. So that's costing us a lot of money. These billion-dollar disasters, they're on the rise, big time. This is a data set that was being held by NOAA for years, going back to 1980. It's a really wonderful data set. I mean, the information's terrible, but to be able to track when and where and what's at risk is really important for a lot of people. But this is one of the data sets that was let go this past year. Fortunately, we've been in a situation at Climate Central where we were able to hire Adam Smith, who oversaw this data set, and we've been able to bring it back to life and fill it in. So it does still exist on our site, and I'll have a link at the end if you want to go exploring that. But the other thing too is it's not just the number, it's the time in between them is getting less and less. And that's really critical for how we prepare our communities, how we can recover from one event and prepare for the next one, or nationally, how that stresses our response systems. I mean, I want to highlight this number here. In 1980, in those early couple of years, it was on average once 80-ish days. In this last decade, it's been about every 12 to 14 days that we're getting one of these billion-dollar disasters at a billion-dollar level. And yes, it is adjusted for inflation. Shows up in other ways in our health too. More mosquito days. We're seeing, Portland, Maine here, 22 more days where mosquitoes are around because as everything migrates from the equator up to the poles and things stay warmer longer, we're seeing mosquitoes stick around longer. Another thing with that same concept is on the bottom right here, longer, stronger allergy seasons. Burlington, about a month longer allergy season that we're getting that we did not get in the past. Also, what really likes all this extra carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is poison ivy. It's getting bigger and stronger, and it's playing out in a lot of ways with our health. One is with the extra spikes of heat, we are getting heat risk days for pregnant women. And this is a growing concern around the world. Air quality, a big issue. We talk about wildfires, but also with extra heat. When you have your pollutants at the ground and it combines with heat, it creates this ground level ozone, and that is unhealthy to breathe. And that is the thing we're seeing on the rise right now. For kids, There's been a lot of eco-anxiety popping up, not understanding why we haven't made changes yet and what we can do about this. And this is a growing area of interest for a lot of people. And one of the ways, I mean, there's a whole lot we could get into with this, but one of the ways to really empower our children is to help get them involved. And then they can drive things forward. I mean, look at Greta Thunberg. She was one person. She didn't even raise her voice at first. It was just a sign. And she grew a whole community out of that. The bottom left, we did an analysis on marathon days and how extra heat is affecting performance. And we're also seeing a rise of power outages related to weather. Planting zones, these are on the move. And here in Manchester, we went from a 5A. Our gardeners are going to understand this better than I would. My husband would probably laugh on hearing me talk about planting because he's the one who does it here. But from 5A to 5B to 6B is where we're going in the future too. And this is also playing into our food prices. It's playing into some of our favorite beverages that are at risk in a warming world, coffee, beer. And I know in New England, we got a lot of Red Sox fans, but I had to do a little my Philly pride here, being a Phillies fan. So we're seeing our sports being affected by this, not just the winter sports, but also the summer sports. And there's a really cool analysis on how a warmer world is leading to more home runs. And we have that on our website too. But there's already a lot that we can do about this. And New Hampshire's already been doing some great stuff all across New England and our country. And one of the things that I really like to point out is some of the areas we don't think are moving forward on solar and wind and renewables because of political reasons. It's just not really the case overall, I should say. I mean, again, things have shifted a lot this past year, and I'm not trying to get political, but look at Texas, for example, on the top right, one of the leading solar states right now. We've got California also, we know, has been leading the way. A lot of people have been following that story for a while, but there's a lot of solar popping up everywhere. And it is one of the prices are just dropping so rapidly while the technology has improved so dramatically. And it is one of the easier energies to get up and running quickly as compared to some of the others. Also, the bottom left here, the power of trees. The trees, they absorb the extra water, they clean our air, they just are gorgeous, right? We just love having them around. So the power of trees, not even just planting more, but also preserving the ones that we have. It's really a climate solution that often gets underappreciated. And communication. Communication is a solution, and all of you here have the power to go out and start a climate conversation or start some form of communication about climate change. And if you need more information, there's a lot more resources on our site, and I can help. I'll have my email at the end too. I'm always happy to help people with this area. And here are some additional resources from what I even showed you that can help kickstart some of these conversations. So this is what we call Climate Shift Index. One of our programs at Climate Central is our attribution program. Now, attribution for our scientists here is, it's one of those branches of climate science has advanced so dramatically over the past 20 years to the point that we can now go in and assess the role of climate change in individual weather events all the way down to daily temperature. So here's a snapshot from today across the United States. And across the top of this here, you'll see the reds or the grays, and it shows the fingerprint of climate change on today's temperatures. And you see across our western part of the United States, it is wild how warm it's been. And it's dramatically affecting the snowpack, which is in turn the water resource for the summer for much of our country out west. So this is a growing concern. But you can see, you can check this any day, and it's for the whole world that we have this too. And if it's just one of those days you want to check, this seems warmer than normal. Is it normal? Here's your way of going and assessing, is this normal or not? We also have this for ocean temperatures, and we have this for tropical systems too. And so fortunately, we don't have it in Atlantic right now, so I wasn't able to show you that, but you get the idea that when there is one, you can go in and see how much stronger this storm was because of climate change. So it's that climate connection right there for you to help you understand. We also have a really robust sea level rise program, and for anyone who is coastal, there's so much amazing information in here. It's a mapping tool. It also can assess the risk at different water levels, different years, and understanding what is at risk for our communities. Just a quick snapshot here. This is looking at Houston, Texas, and going out in time for what would be considered an annual flood by 2050. And everything that's under red will be underwater at that time. We were able to package this in some new ways that on a project we're working on, and it's called Flood Vision. And so this was a tour we just recently did where we built the machinery on top of that Flood Vision rover on the bottom left, which is an EV, which is really cool. And then we took it around the eastern part of the country, and we can map the ground. And what we're able to do is take a look at this. It's to help people understand what's at risk in a more visual way. So I do not know exactly what town this is, so sorry about that. But look, when you start to go underwater, sometimes it's hard to understand what's a couple of feet or what's even 1 foot and what's going to be underwater with it. This is a way to help people understand that. So that's a new project that we're working on. So I bring it back to this because this is really important. Now, the topic of this changed. It's the same exact bullet points that I had before. But after all that you saw, I hope you understand that everyone can be a climate communicator. We've got the resources to help you. We're here to help you navigate anything if you're trying to figure it out, but know your audience. Meet people where they are. There's a lot of things in there that are affecting people's everyday lives. And sadly, there is a climate connection. And that's an endpoint to help people understand and start that conversation. Get it, drive it toward the actions, drive it toward solutions so that they understand what they can do. Because when we empower people to learn and understand, we will see people making decisions that are prioritizing some of these climate solutions. Personalize, localize, tell a story when you can. Don't be afraid. Don't overthink it. So here's some additional resources real quick. I'm just going to go through. If you go to our website on the homepage, there is that bar there in the middle. Enter where you are. And it's going to bring you up to a local page of some of your climate trends. Now, I did a snapshot for New Hampshire. You see there's been, over the winter, 3.5 degrees of warming right there. It's been an increase of precipitation, as we know, and that's overall precipitation. And you can see some of those trends at the bottom, and it keeps scrolling down. There's a whole lot more. This is where you can find all that billion-dollar disaster information. And again, I have these URLs at the bottom, but I'm happy to follow up and share some of these links with people too. If you even just Googled billion-dollar disaster data set, Climate Central, you're going to find this. And there's a lot of cool data interactives in there to explore and understand more. And if you're interested, we've started up these monthly climate briefs. They're really for everyone. And it's an assessment of the climate from the past month and a deeper dive into some other topics here too. So some of the ones coming up, March 19th, not that far away, a couple weeks from now will be our next one. And then we do record them and we put them on our website. And you can see climatecentral.org/climate-briefings. We also have this PowerPoint that anyone is willing, if you're doing presentations, if that's a thing that is, if you're a teacher or if you're in a community and you do any outreach, there's a whole slide deck here that you are absolutely welcome and encouraged to take, make it your own. And I'm going to leave us with this. So this is our atmosphere, right? When you really pull back and look at it. And it seems so big, but that's what protects life on this planet. And it's really up to us what we do with this going forward. So thank you so much for joining. I'm happy to answer a lot of different questions. So I will stop. Oh, real quick. This is the QR code. So you can use this or you can email me, or if you go to our website, scroll all the way down at the bottom. There's a sign up for newsletters link. Make sure you go under Climate Matters if you want to get all of this stuff I'm talking about. And it's weekly, so it's a bunch of stuff. Or you can go to our resources tab and you can start exploring. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bernadette. That was excellent. Well, as Bernadette already mentioned and has encouraged, please submit any and all questions you may have. We'll try and get to as many questions as we can here, and any we can't get to, certainly we can follow up as well. But yeah, right out the gate, we can just jump right in here. It was a really great question from David sort of early on here, and David was curious, why do you think so many people do not understand the difference between weather, what is happening today, and climate, how weather patterns are changing over the course of time? Like what are your sort of like insights or some of your colleagues' insights around that?
You know, I think it's several things, honestly. one is there is a lot of mis and disinformation out there on purpose, but also people are very grounded in what they experience in those moments. And if patterns are shifting over time, if things are shifting over time, it's easy to forget the bigger picture, right? So a lot of people who are experiencing this cold of this winter, it feels really out of whack because we just haven't had one like this in a long time. But when you go back to the data a few decades ago, this was fairly common in a lot of cases. And so it just shows you how we're grounded in our moment and in our experience. But the other piece I'd like to put out there is fundamentally our weather is changing. So there are some linkages, even though there's distinctly a difference between weather and climate. Climate change is shifting how we experience weather. So there are some nuances to that. But there's a lot of those good sayings out there of you pick a vacation based on the climate, but what outfit you put on that what and you
Yeah,
pack according to that, but what outfit you put on that day is the weather, right?
yeah.
So things do go through these patterns, and so that those are some ideas, but there is also a lot of mis and disinformation out there to try and challenge these concepts.
Well, I love it. That was a perfect segue into a question actually I had for you around communicating, the challenge of communicating the differences between weather and climate, and obviously the impacts of climate change. I love that because I mean, through our programming, we're always trying to think of new and different ways to explain it. One way that I love hearing is weather is your mood right now, but climate is your personality. That one's really cool, or like the clothes metaphor, like you're using as well. But I'm kind of curious about that piece as well because I've heard through some other groups who specialize in science communication, sometimes the use of things like metaphors or similes. And I'm kind of curious how much some of that, maybe like intentionally or not, enters into your mind because I can recall another training I was a part of, and one was more like, boy, like ocean acidification, like kind of a tough concept, but they're like, it's like osteoporosis of the sea, or like, the greenhouse effect. It's like putting a warming blanket over our planet. Like these sort of simplifications and maybe oversimplifications, but I'm kind of curious like your experiences with those as well.
Absolutely. There are a lot of really good ones out there, and the blanket is a great example. The more greenhouse gases we put into our atmosphere, the thicker the blanket is. And these are important to that concept of storytelling, right? I mean, this may just be one quick example, but it makes something visual. It makes something more understandable, more accessible. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Those are some of them. Visuals can be some of them. For some people, data is that. I mean, different people connect with different things. I know that I am more of a visual learner. And so these are the different ways. And if you can hit it on many different senses, we've worked with a lot of people in the arts who've used data for design. And that's another great way because that is how some people process this information. We were working with this guy in New Orleans that created a whole song to sea level rise data. And then another person did global temperature data. And it got faster and faster and faster as you went later in time. So there are many different ways you can bring this to life, but it really comes back to data and science and figuring out ways to connect with people.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, I love all those examples you mentioned, and even just the visual stuff. I mean, I would say something that really draws me to the great work that you all do at Climate Central. It's just honestly, I think it's just very aesthetically pleasing. The work that you do is just very, very nice and very clear in that regard.
I will tell Megan Martin. She's our lead designer, and she would love to hear that.
Great, weather and data can be really beautiful. Great question from Kenneth, and I think maybe I've seen a couple other folks sort of ask in a similar way. But Kenneth asks, so knowing that research and public opinion are on your side, what recommendations do you have for engaging most productively with people who believe they, in all caps, know that research and public opinion are wrong? And I might even extend that a little bit from my own point of view. It's just sort of like, at what point maybe is it not worth engaging or something to that effect?
There is a cut of the population that may not be worth engaging. When I show those global warming six Americas, the bubble all the way on the right, that group is aligned with a lot of political concepts. And again, I'm Tony and Ed from Yale and George Mason, the one who've done all this research, and they're really the leads on this. But the way they've described it is there are some people that you're just not going to change their opinion.
Yeah.
So it's up to you how much energy you want to put into that. But if you notice, there's still almost 90% who are at least open to the conversation. So I want to put it that way. And for me, when I do this conversation more with media and stuff, so often what we see for that group that you're not going to change their opinion likely is how far do you engage with them on social media, right? That's different than a personal conversation, but there are even program bots to challenge this. So some of them might not even be a human, right?
Mm.
But with the human connection and how to gather that from this is one way I'd say, Kenneth, is one really trying to get a sense of if this is a person you know or don't know. Again, you would approach the conversation differently. But for me, I've had this conversation several times with people. For example, Penn State football tailgate. There's a lot of different people come. We go there, wide range of views on things, and people have said they're like, well, nobody cares. And I was like, well, you actually might think that, but you can either say like it's not true depending on how comfortable you are with the person, or I was just looking at this research or I just saw this thing and it's crazy, but that's the thing is more people care than you think. And so there are ways to get into that, and you have the data now and you can explore that data, and it might be around a specific one of those questions, might be where you take the conversation. Or for me, I've often brought it to that level of some of the numbers. Again, you're not going to convince everybody by numbers. I'm well aware of that's why it's how well more people care than you think, and then you could bring it to one of the topics that they care about, right? I saw this crazy research that did you know your coffee or your beer or whatever, your chocolate, I mean some of these things.
Yeah.
But also, if people get to the point where they're asking more questions, then there's an opportunity to also bring in some of the solutions, because for a lot of these things there are solutions or at least adaptations that can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you bring up the difference, obviously, between very, very different between engaging with folks either online versus how you might do it in person. And obviously where you have the opportunity to engage with people in person is, it's becoming less and less common these days. So what a great opportunity to at least have a conversation, see how far it goes. And it's okay. You may not change the needle, in a big way with everyone, but it's a human connection at least.
Kenneth, I just had a great example that just popped in my mind recently. So my son wrestles, and I'm in for anyone here who's part of the wrestling community or has had a kid in the wrestling community. It's a tight knit little group, and you spend long hours in these gyms, right? And there was another friend, his son wrestles with my son, and exactly this. He goes, okay. Now I was able to engage in the conversation slightly differently because we come from an area of already knowing each other. And he said, okay, so that's what you do? He's like, I've got a lot of questions. So, okay, you're in a safe place. Bring the questions, right? And the first one was, why is it so cold? And he kept thinking that a lot of the points he was saying, I already knew from classic mis and disinformation campaigns. So I knew where he was going with a lot of his points. So I was able to help guide him through that and say, you might think that, but and then he even got to a point of like with records. He was like, but it's been like crazy records. I'm like, it hasn't. And he's like, so he was interested in data. Again, not everyone's interested in data. So I was able to show him some of the data on the record, cold record, hot. He's like, I had no idea. And so it just opened up more and more and more questions. And a lot of the climate solutions that he had heard about were just mis and disinformation campaigns. So the media he had been following, the social media he had been following, was really feeding him on some of these algorithms. So it was an opportunity to help disconnect some of that.
Yeah, and that's a big challenge. Certainly, there, in some cases, there. I mean, it's already take a very complicated, seemingly complicated topic, and then throw a lot of misinformation into the mix, and you got your work cut out for you for sure.
And I'm not naive, everybody. This is just how I've approached some of this. I'm not naive to it.
Yeah. Well, sort of shifting gears a little bit, I love this question and sort of comment from, excuse me if I mispronounce your name. I'm going to say Cece. Um, Cece says, thank you and gracias for this. I've shared how climate and weather are different to my Spanish-speaking community. They're confused. How can I communicate this when they're watching or used to watching on their local media outlets or the climate report in Latin America? This is key for my community to begin to understand these differences. So much erroneous information for the Spanish-speaking community. Please advise. Thank you, gracias. I'm kind of curious how, I mean, those questions, those comments. Thank you, Cece. But I'm also kind of curious, just yeah, like either from a language or culture perspective, do you potentially engage groups differently?
Well, first I'm going to say thank you, Cece. And so Cece is a broadcaster herself and has done a lot of this great work on her own on air in Spanish. So she should probably be answering this more than I should be. Cece is great. So she's engaged in this in some really interesting ways. We do all of our stuff in Spanish translation. I am not from the Spanish language community, but the person we partner with, John Morales, is. So it's not just the context when he does the translation of specific language, but he can also bring in the science translation, which is really critical because sometimes, I mean, there's so many translators out there that are virtual, but it doesn't always carry the right scientific context. So when we package our climate matters, when you get our stuff, it gives you a whole context of what's the latest science, links to the data, the methodologies, explore more, and he's able to help guide that. On top of that, we've been working with a guy, Joseph Trujillo. He is now at University of Illinois, and he is this amazing researcher who is naturally from a Spanish language community, came to the United States, and has really seen these challenges firsthand with his own family, especially when people come from a different country and they may not experience the same kind of weather events. So they don't even know what to do for a hurricane warning if you're not from an area that gets hurricanes, or tornado warning if you're not from an area that gets tornadoes. And most of the rest of the world doesn't get them like we do. So there's not just a translation that's needed, but there's a lot of challenges with the different layers of Spanish from different parts of the world. And there's a lot of work to be done in this. Now, I do not have all the answers, but I know Joseph Trio is one of the guys trying to figure it out. And we're trying to work with him how we can to see where translations can more effectively land to help people understand. Because the real goal in all of this is to keep people safe and prepared. He's also working with NOAA and all of the warning systems to do translations, not just in Spanish, but in other languages too. Again, if you're not from an area that would get a flood warning or whatever it may be, to help really break through that noise. So, Cece, you are already rocking it. I think we can learn from you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would love to hear more about Cece's work. Well, I know we're coming up to the top of the hour here. Maybe just a couple more. There are some really wonderful comments here, including just one nice kudos from Maddie. I'm gonna out one of our weather observers who's on duty, and you must be a great draw if you're getting one of our on duty observers to join in. Just that she enjoyed the presentation. So did Sandy. And then a great question here from Rebecca. Was curious, to what extent do you work with younger populations? Rebecca was curious, does Climate Central have a way to provide data to elementary and secondary school science and math teachers so they can help their students analyze the results for themselves? I'm kind of curious, yeah, to what extent maybe do you work with younger populations?
We haven't done as much in our work that is specifically targeted, but we've done partnerships over the years with different educators. And there's a subject to climate group that has been
Yeah.
taking some of these and putting them in lesson plans. So there is some of that work out there. But if you are an educator yourself, Rebecca, I mean, you are welcome to go through our stuff. Reach out to me if there's ways we can package or get you data in different ways, because you again then know your audience better than I do. I mean, I kind of do from having some of my own, but you live it and breathe it. So we're happy to work with you in ways that would be helpful.
Oh, that's great. Well, certainly a lot of wonderful resources. Really, really appreciate you presenting this evening and sharing, a little bit about all of the wonderful things happening over at Climate Central. Thank you, everyone who's participated this evening. Lots of great questions. Keep them coming. If we didn't get a chance to answer your question tonight, feel free to reach out to education@mountwashington.org. For those of you who join live on the program, there will be a survey that follows up at the end of this program here and in an email response following up in the next couple days. Please feel free to share your thoughts on tonight's program, any ideas you have for future programs as well. If you'd like to join us for an upcoming program, we're soon to announce our April program, which will be a hybrid in-person and virtual event. Stay tuned for more information on that program there. And you can also watch any of the other programs you may have missed. Register for upcoming programs at mountwashington.org. And finally, if you enjoyed tonight's free program, we strongly encourage you to make a donation to make programs like these happen over at mountwashington.org. You can find the donate button in the upper right-hand corner. That's everything from me. Thank you so much, Bernadette. It's been such a pleasure. Have a great night, and thanks again.
Thank you all.
Take care. Night.